The Olympic Peninsula of Washington state had always been an unforgiving wilderness, where massive Douglas firs and western red cedars stretched endlessly in all directions. On November 3, 2025, the region was experiencing one of its earliest and most severe snowfalls in recorded history. By morning, the forest was blanketed in snow that had accumulated to depths of 4 feet or more, with temperatures plummeting to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. This was where 5 forestry workers found themselves that grey morning, tasked with clearing a remote logging road. Marcus Whitfield, the 41-year-old crew supervisor with 18 years of experience, knew these mountains intimately. Beside him sat Jennifer Chen, 34, the crew's equipment specialist. In the rear compartment rode David Patterson, 29, Sarah Mitchell, 38, and Robert Chen, 42, Jennifer's older brother. The Snowcat had been performing well despite the brutal conditions, its tracked treads churning through snow as they traveled 27 miles from the nearest town, Clearwater. They'd left at 5:30 that morning, taking over 3 hours to reach their destination deep in a section of forest the timber company had only recently gained access to after years of negotiations. Around mid-morning, they reached a massive fallen Douglas fir blocking the road, its trunk easily 6 feet in diameter. But before they could begin clearing it, they needed to address a grinding noise the Snowcat had developed. Marcus brought the vehicle to a halt 50 meters from the fallen tree. What none of them knew was that their intrusion into this remote section of forest had not gone unnoticed. The logging operations had pushed into territories that had remained undisturbed for generations. Disturbing something most people dismissed as folklore, David and Sarah climbed out to examine the right track assembly. The cold hit them like a physical blow as they stepped into the full force of the wind. They crouched beside the track, working in silence, their gloved hands clumsy with cold. Sarah first noticed the unnatural silence, no birds calling, no small animals moving through the underbrush. She mentioned it to David, and though he tried to dismiss it, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck rising, that primitive warning that they were being watched. Then they noticed the smell, a musky odor that seemed completely out of place, something organic and alive that triggered deep instinctive responses. Sarah stood up, her hand moving to the radio at her belt when she saw movement in the tree line approximately 50 meters distant. At first, she thought it might be a bear, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too upright, too human in its proportions. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall, clearly massive, covered in dark reddish-brown hair matted with snow. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, its arms hanging low and reaching nearly to its knees. The face appeared almost human, but fundamentally wrong, with a heavy brow ridge and flat nose. But the eyes, large, dark, and locked directly on her, held unmistakable intelligence. David grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her toward the Snowcat, shouting for the others to get back inside. In the cab, Marcus and Jennifer heard the terror in David's voice and turned to see them scrambling toward the vehicle with desperate urgency. Then, the creature made its presence known with a vocalization unlike anything they had ever heard. It started as a low rumble they could feel in their chests, then built to a piercing scream that seemed to vibrate in their bones and bypass rational thought entirely, triggering primal terror. The sound was impossibly loud, carrying across the clearing and echoing off the trees. It went on for perhaps 10 seconds before cutting off abruptly. The silence that followed felt even more oppressive. Then the creature moved with shocking speed for something so large, emerging from the tree line and covering ground in great strides. Sarah and David reached the rear compartment and scrambled inside, David pulling the door shut just as the creature reached the vehicle. The impact was tremendous, rocking the entire Snowcat with violence that sent equipment flying. Marcus was thrown against the dashboard, his shoulder separating with shooting pain. The creature began hammering the vehicle with its massive fists, each blow producing a sound like a sledgehammer striking steel, creating dents in metal designed to withstand extreme conditions. Jennifer caught her first clear look through the windshield. The creature was easily 8.5 or 9 feet tall, probably weighing 600 or 700 pounds of solid muscle. It moved around the Snowcat with surprising agility, testing different points, searching for weaknesses, its vocalizations continuing. The creature's face was close enough that Jennifer could see individual hairs, see the condensation from its breath fogging the glass. Look directly into those dark eyes and see intelligence looking back. The eyes held something more terrifying than mindless rage. They held purpose and planning. Marcus fumbled for emergency equipment with his one good arm and pulled out a road flare. Together, he and Jennifer lit it and shoved it through the partially open window. The flare seemed to enrage rather than frighten the creature, which turned its full attention to the driver's side and began hammering the roof directly above Marcus's head. In the rear compartment, the 3 workers experienced their own terror as the creature appeared at windows, those dark eyes peering in, assessing them. Robert grabbed a metal pry bar and began hammering it against the walls, creating noise. David found a portable air horn and triggered it. Sarah pulled out her phone, but found no signal. They were completely isolated. The combination of noise and flares made the creature pause briefly, but it renewed its attack with even greater violence. It moved to the rear door and grabbed hold, trying to tear it from its hinges. Robert and Sarah threw themselves against the door from inside, though they knew if the creature applied its full strength, no lock would hold. Then the creature climbed onto the roof. Its enormous weight made the metal groan and buckle, rivets popping free. Marcus realized they had minutes at most before the vehicle's structural integrity failed completely. He tried to start the engine to drive away, but it refused to respond. The attack had damaged the electrical system. The assault continued for 15 to 20 minutes, though every second felt like an hour. That terrible vocalization came at irregular intervals, triggering fear responses hardwired into human neurology. They all made as much noise as possible, hoping someone might hear them, though they knew rationally they were miles from any other human presence. Then, with the same sudden unpredictability that had characterized its appearance, the creature stopped. The hammering ceased, and they heard it descend and move away. Through the windows, they caught glimpses as it circled the Snowcat slowly, almost leisurely, inspecting its handiwork. The creature paused at various points to look in through windows, its face appearing suddenly and causing fresh spikes of terror each time those dark eyes fixed on one of them. Then it turned and walked back toward the tree line, moving through the deep snow with easy efficiency. At the tree line, it paused and turned back, and Marcus could have sworn it was assessing them, deciding whether further violence would be necessary. It vocalized one more time, lower and more resonant, almost like a warning or declaration of ownership. Then it disappeared into the forest with impossible silence, leaving them wondering if what they'd experienced had actually happened. For several minutes, none of them moved or spoke, waiting for the attack to resume. Marcus finally found his voice, asking if everyone was okay. Jennifer assessed his injuries, separated shoulder and bleeding forehead. Painful, but not immediately life-threatening. In the rear compartment, Robert discovered he couldn't put weight on his left leg. His knee was swollen dramatically, already showing purple and black bruising that suggested serious internal damage. Sarah carefully examined it, seeing that it was bent at an angle knees shouldn't bend at, suggesting torn ligaments and possibly worse. They used emergency blankets to seal gaps in the damaged rear door, but the temperature inside was dropping rapidly. Marcus made the decision to try driving back toward town. He tried the key again, and after a horrible moment of nothing, the engine caught and rumbled to life, a sound of overwhelming relief. But the Snowcat responded sluggishly, the track damage creating a lurching motion. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when Jennifer spotted movement ahead. The creature was there, paralleling their movement just inside the forest, keeping pace with them easily. It was clear the thing was tracking them deliberately, not random animal behavior but purposeful pursuit that suggested intelligence and planning. A mile further down the road, the damaged track finally gave out completely with a sound like a gunshot. Marcus fought the controls, but managed only to bring them to a grinding halt at an angle across the road. They were now completely immobile. Through the trees, they could see the creature had stopped as well and was now standing at the forest edge, watching them with what seemed like patience. The situation was rapidly becoming fatal. Robert's knee required immediate medical intervention. Marcus's shoulder limited his mobility severely. David showed signs of shock, his hands trembling uncontrollably, his breathing rapid and shallow. The radio equipment had been damaged during the attack, and while Jennifer worked to repair it, she wasn't optimistic. Their emergency beacon had been activated prematurely and damaged, now non-functional. Their only option was to wait for rescue. Standard protocol required check-ins every 2 hours, and when they failed to check in at 1 p.m., the company would begin organizing rescue. But that might be 4 to 6 hours away, possibly longer. They decided on shifts, with 2 people always watching while others rested. They kept the engine running to provide heat, knowing fuel wasn't unlimited, but that freezing to death seemed worse than carbon monoxide risk. And they waited, watching the creature that continued to watch them. Sarah, during her watch with Marcus, noticed something even more disturbing: glimpses of movement deeper in the forest, other large shapes that might have been more creatures. She whispered to Marcus, and he stared into the forest with her. He counted what might be 3 or 4 additional creatures beyond the one at the forest edge. Multiple creatures suggested not just an isolated individual, but possibly a family group, which meant social structures and coordination. As darkness fell, they had to decide about fuel consumption. They settled on cycles of 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off, hoping to survive the night without exhausting their fuel supply completely. The first cycle off was absolutely brutal. The temperature dropped with shocking speed. Within minutes, ice crystals formed on windows. Within 10, they were all shaking uncontrollably. They huddled together, sharing body heat. Robert in the middle with his fever-racked body, his damaged knee showing signs of infection. The night became an endurance test. 20 minutes of slowly building heat, followed by 20 minutes of worsening cold. The fear of another attack never left them. Every sound transformed into potential threat. Deep in the night, they heard vocalizations from the forest, not aggressive. Screams, but something else entirely. Sounds like language, like communication. The calls came from multiple directions, at least 4 distinct voices. The exchange lasted 10 to 15 minutes, varying in pitch and rhythm, in ways that suggested genuine communication. When silence returned, they wondered what had been decided. Dawn finally came, bringing light but little warmth. What they saw offered no comfort. Enormous tracks surrounded the Snowcat, far too large for any known animal. Counting carefully, they estimated 4 to 6 individuals, with tracks ranging from 14 to 18 inches. As daylight strengthened, the creature emerged again, taking its watching position. In better light, they could see it clearly. Massive, covered in thick, reddish-brown hair, with proportions distinctly non-human. The face was most disturbing, shockingly human-like, yet fundamentally alien. But the eyes haunted them most, tracking their movements with unmistakable intelligence. Hours crawled by. Robert's condition deteriorated alarmingly, his fever spiking higher, consciousness fading. His knee showed red streaks up his thigh, blood poisoning spreading. David's shock deepened into near catatonia. Early afternoon, perhaps 30 hours after the attack, they finally heard an engine approaching. Marcus stumbled out, waving frantically. The rescue crew moved forward but froze when they saw the creature at the tree line. Their reaction confirmed everything. This was real. The creature stood as they arrived, fully visible. For a long moment, everyone stared in stunned silence. Then it vocalized that bone-chilling scream before turning and melting into the forest with impossible silence. The rescue crew rushed forward, loading all 5 workers quickly. The supervisor called for helicopter evacuation. As they drove away, Jennifer looked back and saw movement in the trees. 4 distinct massive shapes watching them leave. The helicopter evacuation went smoothly. Robert's emergency surgery saved his leg, though he'd need months of rehabilitation. Marcus required shoulder surgery. David was hospitalized in psychiatric care for 3 weeks. The aftermath was complicated. All 5 gave detailed statements. The rescue crew corroborated, seeing the creature investigation teams found the damaged Snowcat exactly as described, with damage exceeding any known wildlife capability. They documented footprints, the largest measuring 18.3 inches. The timber company halted operations. Environmental groups seized on the incident. Cryptozoology researchers descended in droves. The workers became unwilling celebrities in a controversy they wanted no part of. None returned to Olympic Peninsula forestry. Marcus relocated to California and later left the industry entirely. Jennifer returned to automotive repair. Robert took medical retirement, eventually divorcing as he struggled with chronic pain and nightmares. Sarah and David both moved far from any forests. For the 5 who lived through it, there was no controversy or doubt. They knew with absolute certainty what they'd encountered. They'd paid a terrible price for that knowledge. Physical injuries that would never fully heal, psychological trauma echoing through their lives, understanding that humanity's dominance was more tenuous than believed. And in the Olympic forests, deep in unexplored territories, the creatures continued their existence, watching and waiting, defending their territories when necessary. Reminders that the world still held genuine mysteries, that some things were meant to remain unknown, glimpsed only briefly by those unfortunate enough to venture where humans were never meant to go.